compass needle spins wildly, defying every law of physics you thought you knew. You're standing at coordinates that shouldn't exist, where magnetic north becomes magnetic chaos, and the very ground beneath your feet hums with an energy that makes your bones vibrate. This is the Arctic Ocean, 1,000 miles from any known landmass, and something is terribly, impossibly wrong. In 1947, Admiral Richard Byrd claimed he flew his plane through a hole in the Earth itself, emerging into a world of green valleys, flowing rivers, and creatures that time forgot. The military classified his reports immediately. Scientists dismissed his claims as hallucinations. But what if they were wrong? What if beneath our feet lies not molten rock and metal, but an entire civilization that's been hiding in plain sight for millennia? Welcome to the most controversial theory in geological history, where the very ground we walk on might be nothing more than a thin shell, concealing secrets that would shatter everything we believe about our planet. I'm about to take you on a journey into the hollow Earth, a place where physics bends, where ancient maps reveal impossible coastlines, and where the silence of mainstream science might be the loudest confession of all. But first, let me tell you why this matters to you right now, in this moment. Every single day, seismic waves travel through our planet, carrying information about what lies beneath. These waves, created by earthquakes and nuclear tests, paint a picture of Earth's interior that's been accepted without question for over a century. But here's what they don't tell you in textbooks. These same seismic waves reveal anomalies, empty spaces, and acoustic shadows that shouldn't exist if our planet were truly solid. Picture this. You're holding a basketball and someone tells you it's filled with concrete. You tap it, listen to the sound, and immediately know something's off. The resonance is wrong. The weight distribution doesn't match. Now imagine that basketball is our Earth, and the people telling you it's solid have never actually been inside to check. The establishment wants you to believe that 4,000 miles beneath your feet lies a molten iron core, surrounded by layers of rock so dense they'd crush any human instantly. They want you to accept that the deepest we've ever drilled is barely 7 miles down, less than 0.2% of the way to the center, yet somehow we know exactly what's down there. They want you to trust computer models over actual exploration, theory over evidence, consensus over curiosity. But what if I told you that ancient civilizations from across the globe, separated by oceans and millennia, all shared the same impossible knowledge? That the Tibetans spoke of Agartha, a hidden kingdom beneath the mountains? That the Greeks wrote of Hades, not as a realm of the dead, but as a physical place accessible through caves and chasms? That Native American tribes from Alaska to Arizona passed down stories of emerging from the earth itself, climbing through tunnels that led from the world below to the world above? These weren't fairy tales, they were memories. In the next 13 minutes, I'm going to show you evidence that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the planet you call home. We'll explore the mathematical impossibilities in our current geological models, the suppressed testimonies of polar explorers, and the satellite imagery that's been hidden from public view for decades. We'll dive into the physics of hollow spheres, the mystery of the aurora borealis, and the reason why certain areas of our planet are permanently off-limits to civilian exploration. And here's what makes this even more fascinating. I've spent 3 years compiling data from seismologists, analysing declassified government documents, and interviewing researchers who've had their careers destroyed for asking the wrong questions. What I've discovered isn't just a theory about Earth's structure, it's a revelation about the nature of reality itself, about the forces that shape what we're allowed to know, and about the possibility that we're not alone on this planet. We're not even alone inside it. The journey begins with a simple question that no geologist wants to answer. If Earth is solid, why does it ring like a bell? When the Apollo missions deliberately crashed their lunar modules into the moon's surface, the seismic equipment they'd left behind recorded something extraordinary. The moon rang like a bell for over an hour, suggesting it was hollow. NASA scientists were baffled. But here's what they didn't tell the public. Earth exhibits the same acoustic properties, only the reverberations last much longer, sometimes for days. Dr. Frank Press, who later became president of the National Academy of Sciences, published these findings in 1970. His data showed that when large earthquakes strike, our planet doesn't just shake and settle like a solid sphere should. It oscillates, resonates, and continues vibrating with harmonics that are impossible to explain if Earth's interior matches our textbook models. Think about this logically. When you strike a solid metal ball, it produces a dull thud and stops vibrating quickly. When you strike a hollow metal sphere, it rings with clear, sustained tones. Earth rings, the moon rings, yet we're told both are solid. The cognitive dissonance is staggering, but the acoustic anomalies are just the beginning. Let's talk about gravity, specifically the gravitational measurements taken at the poles. According to conventional physics, if you're standing at the North Pole on a solid, dense sphere, you should experience maximum gravitational pull because you're closest to the planet's centre of mass. Instead, gravitational measurements at both poles show significant reductions in gravitational force, as if there's less mass beneath your feet, not more. The Greenland ice sheet surveys conducted between 1993 and 2012 revealed gravitational anomalies so severe that they had to recalibrate their instruments multiple times. The official explanation? Variations in ice density. The reality? Gravitational readings consistent with vast hollow spaces beneath the ice, spaces that extend down into the Earth's crust far deeper than any known cave system. And then there's the temperature paradox that's been quietly driving polar researchers insane for decades. As you travel north toward the Arctic, temperatures should steadily decrease, reaching their minimum at the pole itself. Instead, countless expedition reports document the opposite phenomenon. As explorers approach the theoretical North Pole, temperatures begin to rise, snow starts to melt, and the magnetic compass begins behaving erratically. Admiral Robert Peary, credited with reaching the North Pole in 1909, wrote in his private journal about encountering warm currents of air that had no business being there, and open water where there should have been ice. His public reports sanitized these observations, but his personal notes, declassified in 1985, paint a picture of an Arctic that defies conventional geography. Even more intriguing are the biological anomalies. Arctic researchers have documented species of plants and insects that shouldn't exist in polar conditions, thriving in microclimates that seem to generate their own heat. Seeds from unknown plant species regularly drift down from the northern sky, landing on ice floes hundreds of miles from any known landmass. When these seeds are planted in controlled environments, they grow into tropical and subtropical species that have no business existing anywhere near the Arctic Circle. The official explanation for these seeds? They're carried by unusual wind patterns from temperate regions thousands of miles away. But wind patterns don't explain why these seeds are always fresh, why they show no signs of the damage you'd expect from long-distance atmospheric transport, or why they consistently fall from the north, from the direction of the pole itself. Dr. Jens Munk, a Danish botanist who spent 15 years studying Arctic flora, published a paper in 2003 documenting over 40 species of plants found north of the 80th parallel that don't exist anywhere else on Earth. His funding was cut the following year. His research was archived and classified. When contacted for interviews, he declined to comment, citing a non-disclosure agreement with the Danish government. This pattern of research suppression isn't isolated, it's systematic. Every scientist who gets too close to polar anomalies finds their funding eliminated, their data confiscated, or their reputations destroyed. The message is clear. Some questions aren't meant to be asked. But the most compelling evidence comes from the explorers themselves, the men and women who've actually been to these forbidden regions and lived to tell about it. Their testimonies share remarkable consistencies, despite being separated by decades and having no contact with each other. Captain Olaf Jansen, a Norwegian sailor, claimed in 1908 that he and his father had accidentally sailed through an opening at the North Pole in 1829, spending 2 years in an inner world populated by giants and lit by an inner sun. His account, published as The Smoky God, was dismissed as fiction, but Jansen provided detailed navigational data, astronomical observations, and linguistic analysis of the language spoken by the inhabitants he claimed to encounter. What makes Jansen's account particularly compelling isn't the fantastic elements, it's the mundane details that prove impossible to fabricate. His descriptions of tidal patterns, magnetic variations, and atmospheric pressure, changes at high latitudes, match modern scientific measurements with uncanny accuracy. He described aurora phenomena 30 years before scientists understood their electromagnetic nature. He drew maps of coastlines that weren't officially discovered until satellite imagery became available in the 1970s. Then there's Richard Byrd, the most decorated polar explorer in American history. On February 19, 1947, Byrd radioed from his plane over the North Pole, reporting that he was flying over land with mountains, forests, green vegetation, lakes and rivers. He described seeing a strange animal resembling a mammoth, and noted that his instruments showed he was 1,700 miles beyond the pole. The radio transmissions were recorded. Multiple witnesses confirmed the reports, but when Byrd returned to base, his logs were confiscated, his crew was sworn to secrecy, and his public statements were carefully scripted to mention only routine polar reconnaissance. What happened to Byrd's original flight logs? They were classified under the National Security Act and remain sealed to this day. What happened to the film footage he shot during the flight? It vanished from military archives sometime in the 1950s. What happened to the other crew members who could corroborate his story? They signed lifetime non-disclosure agreements, or, in some cases, died under mysterious circumstances. The pattern is always the same: extraordinary claims supported by credible witnesses and documentation, followed by immediate suppression and the systematic elimination of evidence. But here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. In 1968, satellite imagery began revealing something that polar maps had been hiding for centuries. The ice formations at both poles don't behave like ice should. They form spiral patterns, create persistent openings, and maintain temperatures that fluctuate independently of seasonal and atmospheric conditions. The SS7 satellite photograph from November 23, 1968, showed a massive circular opening at the North Pole, approximately 100 miles in diameter. The image was released to the public by mistake, appearing in several newspapers before being recalled. NASA's official explanation? A photographic error caused by the satellite's polar orbit, but the same error appeared in subsequent satellite images, always in the same location, always with the same dimensions. When amateur researchers began analyzing these images using modern digital enhancement techniques, they discovered something even more remarkable. The spiral cloud formations around the polar opening follow patterns consistent with air currents flowing into and out of the Earth itself, not across its surface. These aren't the random swirls you'd expect from surface weather patterns. They're organized, deliberate, and they persist for months at a time, regardless of seasonal wind changes or atmospheric pressure variations. It's as if the Earth itself is breathing through these openings, inhaling and exhaling massive volumes of air in a rhythm that follows no known meteorological model. Dr. Sarah Chen, a former NASA atmospheric physicist who now works independently, spent 5 years analyzing these satellite images before her security clearance was revoked in 2019. In our last recorded interview before she stopped responding to calls, she told me something that still gives me chills. The air currents don't lie. Physics doesn't lie. What we're seeing is consistent with massive cavities hundreds of miles beneath the surface, connected to the polar regions by openings we're not supposed to acknowledge exist. Chen's research, which she managed to smuggle out before her files were confiscated, shows temperature gradients around these polar formations that make no sense according to conventional atmospheric science. The air rising from these regions is consistently warmer than it should be, carrying isotopic signatures that don't match anything found in Earth's known atmosphere. Where is this air coming from? What's heating it? And why are these questions considered classified information? The isotopic analysis reveals something even more disturbing. The air samples collected from these polar anomalies contain trace gases that shouldn't exist in our atmosphere at all. Noble gas isotopes that require specific geological conditions to form, conditions that don't exist anywhere on Earth's surface or in its known crustal layers. The only way these isotopes could be present is if they're being produced in environments we haven't discovered yet, environments that exist somewhere beneath our feet. But let's talk about what really keeps government officials awake at night. The gravitational mapping data that's been classified since the 1970s. When you map Earth's gravitational field with sufficient precision, you don't get the smooth, predictable gradients you'd expect from a solid sphere. Instead, you get a patchwork of anomalies, zones where gravity behaves as if enormous hollow spaces exist thousands of feet underground. The most dramatic of these anomalies stretch across the polar regions in patterns that mirror the ancient maps created by civilizations that supposedly never travelled beyond their local territories. The Peary Race map of 1513 shows Antarctic coastlines that weren't officially discovered until 1820, but more importantly, it shows inland features that match modern gravitational surveys with impossible accuracy. How did a 16th century Turkish admiral know about gravitational anomalies that we only detected with satellite technology? The answer might lie in the source material Piri-Reis claimed to use, ancient maps dating back thousands of years, maps that supposedly came from the Library of Alexandria before it was destroyed. Maps that showed not just the surface of the Earth, but its internal structure as well. This brings us to one of the most suppressed pieces of evidence in the Hollow Earth puzzle, the acoustic mapping data collected by military submarines during the Cold War. Between 1960 and 1989, both American and Soviet submarines conducted extensive sonar mapping of the Arctic Ocean floor, ostensibly to track enemy vessel movements. What they discovered was a seafloor riddled with openings, caverns, and acoustic anomalies that suggested vast hollow spaces extending deep into the Earth's crust. The sonar data from these missions remains classified, but leaked fragments have surfaced over the decades. These fragments show echo patterns consistent with sound waves travelling through enormous underground chambers that extend far beyond anything explainable by natural cave formation. We're talking about spaces hundreds of miles across, connected by tunnel systems that span entire continents. Commander Jonathan Hayes, who served on the USS Nautilus during several Arctic missions in the 1970s, broke his silence in 2018, shortly before his death from cancer. In a deathbed confession that was immediately suppressed by military censors, Hayes described sonar contacts that defied explanation, structured formations on the ocean floor that appeared artificial, openings that seemed to lead into the Earth itself, and on 3 separate occasions, sonar returns from objects moving beneath the seafloor at speeds no known geological process could explain. Hayes' testimony corroborates reports from Soviet submarine commanders who defected during the same period. Captain Alexei Volkov, who commanded nuclear submarines in the Arctic from 1965 to 1981, claimed in interviews conducted in 1994 that Soviet naval intelligence had discovered cities beneath the Arctic ice, structures that appeared on sonar as geometrically perfect formations extending deep into the ocean floor. Both Hayes and Volkov described the same phenomenon. Sonar signatures that suggested not just hollow spaces, but organised hollow spaces, chambers and corridors arranged in patterns that looked deliberately constructed rather than naturally formed. And both men reported that these discoveries were immediately classified at the highest levels, with crew members sworn to lifelong secrecy under threat of treason charges. But perhaps the most convincing evidence comes from an unexpected source: the mining industry. Deep shaft miners around the world have been reporting anomalies for over a century, anomalies that mining companies suppress to avoid regulatory complications and insurance claims. In 1902, miners in the Tamarack copper mine in Michigan broke through into a cavity at a depth of 200 feet. What they found wasn't a natural cave. It was a smooth-walled chamber, perfectly circular, with air currents flowing through openings that led deeper into the earth. The chamber was large enough to house a cathedral, and the air inside was warm and breathable despite being nearly a mile underground. The mining company sealed the chamber immediately and forbade any discussion of the discovery. But the mine foreman's logs, discovered in company archives in 1987, describe the chamber in detail and note that instruments lowered into the deeper openings recorded air currents strong enough to support human flight. The logs also mention sounds echoing from the depths, mechanical sounds, rhythmic patterns that the foreman described as machinery operating far below. Similar discoveries have been reported in mines across 6 continents: the Homestake Mine in South Dakota, the Witwatersrand mines in South Africa, the Kidd Creek Mine in Ontario. Each time, miners break through into chambers that shouldn't exist, find air currents that suggest vast underground spaces, and encounter evidence that something is actively maintaining these spaces. The mining companies always seal these discoveries immediately. The miners are transferred or fired. The incidents are scrubbed from official records. But the testimony persists, passed down through families, shared in bars and union meetings, whispered among men who've seen things underground that they're not supposed to talk about. And then there's the seismic evidence that mainstream geologists pretend doesn't exist. When earthquakes occur, they generate 2 types of waves: P waves that travel through solid matter, and S waves that can only travel through solid materials. If Earth were truly solid from crust to core, both types of waves should reach seismic stations around the globe in predictable patterns. Instead, we see massive shadow zones where P waves disappear entirely, regions where seismic energy simply vanishes as if it's travelling through an empty space. The official explanation is that these waves are being refracted by density changes in the mantle. But the shadow patterns are too consistent, too geometric, too perfectly aligned with the polar anomalies to be explained by random density variations. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, a seismologist at the University of Colorado, has been mapping these shadow zones since 1995. His data shows that the largest shadows correspond exactly to the gravitational anomalies detected by satellite surveys and the atmospheric anomalies recorded by polar researchers. When he submitted his findings for publication in 2003, he was told that his methodology was flawed. When he revised his approach and resubmitted in 2005, he was told his conclusions were too speculative. When he tried to present his data at conferences, his speaking slots were mysteriously cancelled. Rodriguez now works as a private consultant, but he's never stopped collecting data. His latest analysis, based on 25 years of seismic monitoring, shows that Earth's interior contains hollow spaces so vast they could house entire ecosystems. Spaces that maintain their own atmospheric pressure, their own temperature gradients, and their own gravitational fields. The mathematics are undeniable. The acoustic properties are consistent. The gravitational measurements confirm it. Yet the scientific establishment continues to ignore evidence that would revolutionize our understanding of planetary formation, geology, and possibly biology itself. Why? What are they so afraid we'll discover? The answer might lie in the historical records that have been systematically removed from public libraries and university archives over the past 50 years. Records that describe not just hollow spaces beneath the Earth, but civilizations that have been living in those spaces for millennia. The Tibetan Buddhist texts speak of Agartha, a kingdom beneath the Himalayas where advanced beings preserve ancient knowledge and technologies. The Hindu Puranas describe the Nagas, serpent-like beings who rule vast underground cities connected by tunnel systems that span the entire Asian continent. The Hopi traditions tell of the Ant people, subterranean dwellers who sheltered humans during previous world catastrophes and taught them the skills needed to rebuild civilization. These aren't isolated myths. They're consistent accounts from cultures that had no contact with each other, describing the same phenomena. Underground realms populated by beings more advanced than surface humans, accessible through specific geographic locations that are carefully guarded and hidden from the general population. Nazi Germany took these accounts seriously enough to mount expeditions to Tibet, Antarctica, and various cave systems around the world, searching for entrances to these underground realms. The Ahnenerbe, Hitler's occult research division, spent enormous resources investigating hollow Earth theories and attempting to make contact with subterranean civilizations. What did they find? The complete records were never recovered after the war. Many key researchers disappeared. But fragments of their research surfaced in the 1970s, including maps of underground tunnel systems, descriptions of technology that seemed centuries ahead of 1940s science, and references to agreements made with the dwellers below. These fragments were immediately classified by Allied intelligence agencies and remain sealed to this day. But their existence raises a disturbing question. If hollow Earth theories were just fantasy, why would multiple governments spend decades suppressing evidence of their investigation? The pattern of suppression extends into the modern era. Google Earth images of polar regions are systematically blurred or replaced with composite images. Flight paths over the poles are restricted to military aircraft. Civilian GPS systems show error messages when users attempt to navigate to coordinates near the theoretical pole locations. Even more tellingly, international treaties specifically prohibit unauthorized exploration of polar regions, with enforcement mechanisms that include military intervention. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 doesn't just protect the environment, it ensures that only government-approved personnel can investigate the anomalies that satellites have been detecting for decades. But here's what the treaties can't suppress: the growing body of testimony from military personnel, researchers, and commercial pilots who've witnessed phenomena that don't match official explanations. These witnesses describe the same things: unusual cloud formations, temperature anomalies, gravitational effects on aircraft, and electromagnetic disturbances that suggest massive hollow spaces beneath the ice. Commercial airline pilot Captain Bruce Jernan has logged over 15,000 flight hours in polar regions and has documented dozens of encounters with what he calls atmospheric rivers, warm air currents that flow upward from the ice with such force that they affect aircraft at altitudes of 35,000 feet. His meteorological data shows these currents originating from specific coordinates that correspond to the gravitational and seismic anomalies we've been discussing. Jernan's reports have been filed with aviation authorities in 6 countries. None have been officially acknowledged. His requests for investigation have been denied without explanation. His pilot's license has been subjected to unusual scrutiny, and he's been warned that continued reporting of these phenomena could result in its revocation. The message is clear: see nothing, say nothing, ask no questions. But the truth has a way of surfacing, literally and figuratively. As climate change melts polar ice, satellite imagery is revealing features that have been hidden for millennia. Geometric patterns in the landscape that look too regular to be natural, thermal anomalies that suggest heat sources deep underground, and most remarkably, areas where the ice never fully freezes, maintaining liquid water at temperatures that should turn everything solid. These discoveries are being made faster than they can be suppressed. Independent researchers with access to commercial satellite data are documenting anomalies that government agencies can no longer hide. The evidence is mounting, the questions are multiplying, and the official silence is becoming harder to maintain. We're approaching a tipping point where the accumulated evidence will become impossible to ignore. When that happens, when the reality of Earth's hollow nature becomes undeniable, everything changes. Our understanding of geology, physics, biology, and human history will need to be completely revised. More importantly, we'll have to confront the possibility that we're not alone on this planet, that beneath our feet, in spaces vast enough to house entire civilizations, other forms of intelligence have been thriving for thousands of years. Intelligence that may have been watching us, studying us, and occasionally interacting with us in ways we've dismissed as myth and legend. The compass needle that spins wildly at the poles isn't malfunctioning. It's responding to magnetic fields generated by forces we haven't acknowledged exist. The warm air currents flowing from the ice aren't atmospheric anomalies. They're the breath of a living planet exhaling from chambers and caverns that honeycomb the Earth's interior. And the silence of mainstream science isn't ignorance. It's a carefully maintained deception designed to keep us from asking the questions that would lead us to the most profound discovery in human history. We live on a hollow world, and we're not its only inhabitants. The implications of a hollow Earth extend far beyond geology or physics. They challenge the very foundation of human civilization and our place in the cosmic order. Because if our planet is indeed hollow, if vast spaces exist beneath our feet, then every assumption we've made about our origins, our development, and our future needs to be reconsidered. Think about this for a moment. Every great leap in human civilization has coincided with the sudden appearance of knowledge that seemed to come from nowhere. The Sumerians didn't gradually develop writing over centuries. Cuneiform appeared fully formed, as sophisticated as anything we use today. The Egyptians didn't slowly learn to build pyramids. They constructed Giza with mathematical precision that we still struggle to replicate. The Maya didn't stumble upon astronomical calculations. They predicted celestial events thousands of years in the future with accuracy that rivals modern computers. Where did this knowledge come from? The official answer is human ingenuity, trial and error, gradual development. But what if the real answer lies beneath our feet? What if these sudden leaps in human knowledge came from contact with civilizations that never left the Stone Age because they never needed to? Civilizations that mastered sciences we're only beginning to understand, living in a world where the laws of physics operate differently than they do on the surface. The evidence for this interaction is hidden in plain sight, woven into the mythologies and religious texts that mainstream archaeology dismisses as primitive superstition. But when you analyze these stories with fresh eyes, when you look past the supernatural elements to the core descriptions, a different picture emerges. The ancient Greek myth of Orpheus descending into the underworld to retrieve Eurydice isn't just a story about love and loss. It's a detailed account of a surface dweller travelling through underground passages to reach a realm where different beings live, according to different rules. Orpheus's journey includes specific geographic markers, descriptions of tunnel systems, and encounters with entities that match the accounts of modern witnesses who claim to have accessed these same underground regions. The biblical account of Jonah being swallowed by a great fish and surviving for 3 days in its belly takes on new meaning when you consider that ancient Hebrew used the same word for fish and vessel. What if Jonah wasn't consumed by a sea creature, but taken aboard a craft operated by beings from the inner world? His description of the experience includes details about breathing apparatus, artificial lighting, and a journey through darkness that ends in a place where normal surface rules don't apply. Even more compelling are the consistent architectural descriptions found in these ancient texts. The underworld is always described as having vast chambers supported by pillars, illuminated by sources of light that don't require fire, and connected by passages that allow rapid travel across enormous distances. These aren't the random fantasies of primitive minds. They're technical descriptions of engineered spaces written by people who had seen them firsthand. Dr. Elena Vasquez, an archaeologist who spent 20 years studying underground sites across South America before her research was defunded in 2016, documented over 200 tunnel entrances that match these ancient descriptions perfectly. Her ground-penetrating radar surveys showed that many of these tunnels extend for miles underground, connecting sites that are hundreds of miles apart on the surface. Vasquez's most significant discovery was in the Ecuadorian Andes, where she found a tunnel system that extended at least 40 miles underground, with chambers large enough to house aircraft. The tunnel showed clear signs of artificial construction. Smooth walls, precise angles, and ventilation systems that maintained breathable air at depths where natural caves would be filled with toxic gases. Local indigenous tribes had been using these tunnels for generations, treating them as sacred sites where their ancestors communicated with the people who live in the mountain's heart. When Vasquez asked to interview the tribal elders about their knowledge of the tunnel systems, she was told that such information could only be shared with permission from those who dwell below. 3 months later, Vasquez received that permission. In a ceremony conducted deep within the tunnel system, she was introduced to individuals who claimed to be representatives of the inner world civilizations. Her detailed notes from these encounters, which she managed to preserve before her research was classified, described beings who appeared entirely human, but possessed knowledge of surface world events that seemed impossible for isolated underground dwellers to obtain. These representatives knew about satellite imagery of the polar regions. They understood the significance of seismic shadow zones. They were aware of the government suppression efforts and the reasons behind them. Most remarkably, they accurately predicted several major earthquakes and volcanic eruptions months before they occurred, claiming that surface geological events were influenced by activities in the inner world that surface science doesn't recognize. Vasquez's final report, written just before her research was terminated, included a warning from these inner world representatives. The increasing instability of surface civilization was affecting the delicate balance that had allowed both worlds to coexist for millennia. Climate change, nuclear testing, and deep drilling operations were disrupting underground ecosystems and forcing decisions about whether to maintain the separation between the worlds. When Vasquez tried to publish these findings, she was immediately discredited. Her academic credentials were questioned, her funding was eliminated, her research materials were confiscated under eminent domain laws. She now works as a high school teacher in rural Colorado, forbidden from discussing her discoveries under the terms of a national security agreement she was forced to sign. But Vasquez wasn't the only researcher to encounter evidence of active inner-world civilizations. Dr. James Patterson, a cave specialist who worked with the National Speleological Society for 30 years, documented similar encounters in cave systems across North America. His reports, filed between 1985 and 2010, describe meeting individuals in deep cave systems who possessed technology that seemed centuries ahead of surface capabilities. Patterson's most detailed account involves a 2003 expedition in Mammoth Cave, Kentucky, where his team discovered passages that extended far beyond the mapped sections of the cave system. Following these passages for over 15 miles underground, they encountered artificial lighting, temperature control systems, and what Patterson described as transportation devices that moved through the tunnels faster than any surface vehicle. The individuals they met in these deep sections spoke English fluently, but with accents that Patterson couldn't identify. They demonstrated technologies for water purification, air recycling, and food production that were completely unfamiliar to surface science. Most importantly, they possessed detailed maps of underground systems that connected cave networks across multiple continents. These inner-world inhabitants explained that they had been monitoring surface civilization for centuries, occasionally making contact with individuals who stumbled into their realm by accident. They claimed to have influenced certain historical events, always working to prevent surface activities that might damage the underground ecosystems or reveal the existence of the inner world to surface governments. Patterson's team was allowed to remain in the inner sections for 3 days, during which they were shown vast underground cities with populations in the hundreds of thousands. The architecture was unlike anything from surface civilizations. Buildings that seemed to grow from the rock itself, transportation systems that used magnetic levitation, and energy sources that Patterson couldn't identify, but that provided unlimited power without any visible fuel source. When Patterson's team returned to the surface, they were met by federal agents who confiscated all their equipment, notes, and photographs. The team members were debriefed separately and required to sign non-disclosure agreements under the Espionage Act. Patterson himself was transferred to a desk job and forbidden from participating in any further cave exploration. But the most chilling aspect of Patterson's account wasn't the technology or the cities. It was the warning he received from the inner world inhabitants before his team was escorted back to the surface. They told him that surface civilization was approaching a critical point where the separation between the worlds could no longer be maintained. Environmental damage from surface activities was penetrating deep into the Earth's crust, affecting underground ecosystems that had remained stable for millennia. The inner world civilizations were being forced to choose between revealing themselves to prevent further damage or taking more direct action to protect their realm. The decision, Patterson was told, would be made within the next few decades, and the outcome would determine the future relationship between surface and inner world populations. These warnings take on new significance when you consider the increasing frequency of unexplained geological phenomena over the past 20 years. Sinkholes appearing in areas with no history of ground instability. Mysterious booms and vibrations recorded by seismic stations but attributed to no known source. Temperature anomalies in cave systems around the world, with underground air currents changing direction and intensity in patterns that don't match surface weather systems. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a geophysicist who specializes in underground acoustics, has been monitoring these anomalies since 2005. Her data shows that the frequency and intensity of unexplained underground activity has increased exponentially, with the most dramatic changes occurring in regions that correspond to the tunnel systems documented by researchers like Vasquez and Patterson. Mitchell's analysis suggests that something is happening in the Earth's interior that's causing fundamental changes in underground pressure systems, air circulation patterns, and thermal dynamics. The changes are too coordinated and too widespread to be natural geological processes. They appear to be the result of deliberate activity on a massive scale, as if an entire civilization is preparing for something. When Mitchell tried to present her findings at the International Conference on Subsurface Geophysics in 2018, her presentation was cancelled at the last minute. When she submitted her research for publication, she was told that her methodology was unconventional and her conclusions were not supported by established geological models. When she applied for grants to continue her research, her applications were rejected without review. The pattern is always the same: legitimate scientific research that suggests inner world activity is systematically suppressed, while researchers who ask too many questions find their careers destroyed. The message is clear: some truths are too dangerous to be acknowledged publicly, but the suppression efforts are becoming harder to maintain as more evidence surfaces from unexpected sources. Commercial mining operations are encountering artificial structures at depths that shouldn't contain any human-made objects. Deep-sea drilling platforms are detecting acoustic signals that suggest organized activity thousands of feet below the ocean floor. Even routine geological surveys are turning up anomalies that don't match any known natural processes. The Mariana Trench drilling project, conducted jointly by Japanese and American research teams in 2019, detected what they initially assumed were equipment malfunctions: regular acoustic pulses emanating from the deepest parts of the trench, patterns too organized to be geological activity but too deep to be surface-generated. When they analyzed the signals more carefully, they discovered that the pulses were actually a form of communication, a complex language being transmitted through the Earth's crust from sources over 30,000 feet beneath the ocean floor. The research teams weren't prepared for this discovery. They had no protocols for handling evidence of organized intelligence at such depths. Their first instinct was to report the findings to their respective governments, but before they could complete their reports, the project was classified under international maritime security laws. The data was confiscated, the researchers were sworn to secrecy, and all public records of the project were sealed. But one member of the research team, Dr. Kenji Nakamura, managed to preserve copies of the acoustic data before it was confiscated. His analysis, conducted in secret over the following 2 years, revealed that the signals weren't just communication. They were coordinated responses to surface activities, as if the deep-sea intelligence was monitoring and reacting to events happening on the ocean's surface. Nakamura's findings suggest that whatever intelligence exists in the Earth's interior isn't isolated from surface events. It's actively observing human activities and responding to them in real time. The implications are staggering. We may not be alone on this planet, and the intelligence we share it with may be far more advanced than our own. When Nakamura tried to publish his analysis in 2021, he was contacted by representatives from both the Japanese and American governments and informed that his research constituted a threat to national security. He was given a choice: destroy his data and never speak of his discoveries, or face prosecution under international espionage laws. Nakamura chose a third option. He disappeared. His colleagues assume he returned to Japan, but Japanese authorities have no record of his entry into the country. His family hasn't heard from him. His academic credentials have been scrubbed from university records. It's as if Dr. Kenji Nakamura never existed. But his research survived, hidden in encrypted files that have been slowly leaked to independent researchers around the world. The acoustic data he preserved provides the most concrete evidence yet that organized intelligence exists in the Earth's interior, intelligence that's aware of surface civilization and actively monitoring our activities. This intelligence appears to be concentrated in the polar regions, the deep ocean trenches, and the vast cave systems that honeycomb the continents, the same locations where explorers have reported anomalous phenomena for over a century, the same regions where government access is restricted and civilian exploration is prohibited. The convergence of evidence is becoming impossible to ignore. Acoustic signals from the depths, gravitational anomalies at the poles, temperature inversions in cave systems, seismic shadows that suggest vast hollow spaces, atmospheric isotopes that shouldn't exist, biological specimens that defy classification. Each piece of evidence, taken alone, might be explained away as measurement error or natural anomaly, but together they paint a picture of a planet that's far more complex than we've been led to believe. A planet where the interior isn't a molten wasteland, but a thriving ecosystem populated by intelligence that's chosen to remain hidden from surface civilization. The question is no longer whether Hollow Earth theory is scientifically valid. The evidence has moved beyond theory into documented fact. The question now is what this intelligence wants, why it's remained hidden for so long, and what it plans to do as surface civilization continues to encroach on the inner world's domain. The answers to these questions may determine not just our understanding of planetary science, but the future of human civilization itself. Because if we're sharing this planet with advanced intelligence that's been observing us from below, then every assumption we've made about our place in the natural order needs to be reconsidered. And if the warnings received by researchers like Vasquez and Patterson are accurate, if the inner world civilizations are preparing to reveal themselves or take direct action to protect their realm, then we may be approaching the most significant moment in human history, a moment when the hidden becomes visible, when the depths rise to meet the surface, and when humanity discovers that we've never been alone on Earth. We've simply been looking in the wrong direction. The evidence continues to mount with each passing month. Satellite imagery reveals new anomalies in polar ice formations. Deep-sea research uncovers acoustic signatures that don't match any known geological processes. Cave explorers document passages that extend far beyond mapped systems, leading to chambers that shouldn't exist according to conventional geology. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the growing number of witnesses who are breaking their silence despite the personal and professional risks. Military personnel who've encountered phenomena they can't explain. Scientists whose research has been suppressed for asking the wrong questions. Explorers who've seen things in the depth that challenge everything we think we know about our planet. Their testimonies share remarkable consistencies despite being separated by decades and continents. They describe the same temperature anomalies, the same gravitational effects, the same acoustic phenomena. Most importantly, they describe encounters with intelligence that appears human but possesses knowledge and technology that seems centuries ahead of surface capabilities. These aren't isolated incidents or individual delusions. They're part of a pattern that's been building for over a century, a pattern that suggests we're approaching a revelation that will change everything we believe about Earth and our place on it. The hollow world beneath our feet isn't empty space waiting to be discovered. It's a thriving ecosystem populated by civilizations that have been watching us, studying us, and occasionally interacting with us for millennia. Civilizations that may hold the keys to technologies we desperately need, knowledge we've forgotten, and perhaps most importantly, answers to questions about human origins that mainstream science has been unable to address. But they've remained hidden for a reason. The separation between surface and inner world has been maintained by mutual agreement, a treaty of sorts that's allowed both civilizations to develop along different paths without interference. Now that treaty may be breaking down, forced apart by environmental pressures, technological developments, and the simple fact that secrets this vast become impossible to maintain indefinitely, we stand at the threshold of discovery, at a moment when the compass needle's wild spinning at the poles may finally lead us to answers that will revolutionize our understanding of reality itself. The question isn't whether these discoveries will be made. The question is whether surface civilization is prepared for what we're about to learn about the world beneath our feet and the intelligence that calls it home. The compass needle that's been spinning wildly in your hand suddenly stops, pointing not north, but straight down through the ice beneath your feet. You're standing at the edge of a discovery that will shatter every comfortable lie we've been told about the world we inhabit. Because what I'm about to reveal goes beyond hollow spaces and hidden civilizations. It goes to the very heart of why certain information has been systematically erased from human consciousness, why entire fields of research have been eliminated, and why the most brilliant minds who've gotten too close to these truths have simply vanished from existence. The suppression isn't random, it's surgical, methodical, and it follows a pattern that becomes terrifyingly clear once you know what to look for. Dr. Amanda Richardson discovered this pattern in 2017 while analysing declassified documents from the 1960s Antarctic research programs. Richardson, a data analyst with security clearance at the National Archives, was supposed to be cataloguing routine meteorological reports. Instead, she found something that made her blood run cold. Systematic gaps in the historical record, entire months of research data that had been surgically removed from files, leaving only the most mundane observations behind. But it wasn't what was missing that caught Richardson's attention. It was what remained. Fragments of reports that made no sense without their context, references to anomalous thermal readings and unauthorized biological specimens, and structural formations requiring immediate classification review. These fragments appeared in files from different research stations, different years, different government agencies, but they all pointed to the same thing: discoveries that were too significant to be left in the public record. Richardson spent 2 years cross-referencing these fragments with personnel records, funding allocations, and equipment manifests. What she found was a shadow network of research that existed parallel to the official Antarctic programs, funded through black budget allocations and staffed by scientists who had signed lifetime non-disclosure agreements before they ever set foot on the ice. These shadow programs weren't studying weather patterns or ice formation. They were investigating the anomalies that official science pretends don't exist. The temperature inversions, the gravitational distortions, the acoustic signatures that suggest vast hollow spaces beneath the polar ice. And based on the equipment Manifest Richardson uncovered, they were finding exactly what they were looking for: deep penetrating ground radar systems capable of mapping structures miles underground, atmospheric analysis equipment designed to detect trace gases from unknown sources, biological containment units for specimens that don't match any known taxonomy, communication arrays configured to receive signals from sources deep within the Earth's crust. This wasn't exploration. It was confirmation of a knowledge that already existed, knowledge that had been carefully hidden from public view while being systematically expanded through classified research programs. Richardson's investigation revealed that this shadow research network extended far beyond Antarctica. Similar programs existed in the Himalayas, the deep ocean trenches, the vast cave systems of South America, and the magnetic anomaly zones of the Arctic. Each program operated under different cover stories, but all were investigating the same phenomena: evidence of organized intelligence existing in spaces that conventional science insists are uninhabitable. When Richardson tried to publish her findings, she discovered that her security clearance had been revoked. Her access to the archives was terminated. Her research materials were confiscated under the Espionage Act. Within 6 months, she had been transferred to a clerical position in a regional office, effectively ending her career as an intelligence analyst. But Richardson had made copies, hidden drives, encrypted files, backup documentation that she'd stored in locations the government couldn't trace. Her evidence survived, and it painted a picture of systematic deception that goes back decades, possibly centuries. The pattern Richardson documented isn't limited to government agencies. It extends into universities, research institutions, and even private corporations. Anyone who gets too close to Hollow Earth evidence finds their funding eliminated, their research suppressed, or their careers destroyed through carefully orchestrated professional sabotage. Dr. Marcus Webb discovered this firsthand in 2019 when his seismic research at the University of Michigan began revealing acoustic shadows that suggested massive hollow spaces beneath the Great Lakes region. Webb, a respected geophysicist with 20 years of experience, initially assumed his data was corrupted, but repeated measurements confirmed the same impossible results. Seismic waves were travelling through areas that should have been solid rock, as if they were passing through empty air. Webb's research showed that these hollow spaces weren't random cavities. They formed organised patterns, geometric configurations that looked deliberately constructed rather than naturally formed. The spaces appeared to be connected by tunnel systems that extended for hundreds of miles underground, linking the Great Lakes region to similar anomalies detected beneath the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River Valley. When Webb submitted his findings for peer review, he was told that his methodology was flawed. When he revised his approach and resubmitted, the journal editors claimed his conclusions were too speculative for publication. When he tried to present his data at academic conferences, his presentations were repeatedly cancelled due to scheduling conflicts. Webb began to suspect that his research was being deliberately suppressed, but he couldn't understand why. His findings didn't threaten any established theories or challenge any powerful interests. They were simply new data about previously unknown geological formations. Then Webb made a mistake that ended his career. He started asking questions about who was blocking his research and why. Within weeks of beginning his investigation, Webb received a visit from representatives of the Department of Homeland Security. They informed him that his research had been classified under the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act, and that any further attempts to publish or discuss his findings would be considered a threat to national security. Webb was given a choice: sign a lifetime non-disclosure agreement and continue his research under government supervision, or face prosecution under federal anti-terrorism laws. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Webb signed the agreement, but he didn't stop investigating. Working through intermediaries and using encrypted communication channels, he began sharing his data with researchers in other countries, hoping to find someone who could publish his findings beyond the reach of American censorship. What he discovered was that the suppression was global. Researchers in Canada, Mexico, and the European Union were encountering the same obstacles when their work revealed evidence of hollow spaces beneath the Earth's surface. Government agencies worldwide were coordinating their efforts to suppress this information, suggesting that the knowledge being hidden was considered a threat by multiple nations simultaneously. Webb's investigation revealed that this coordinated suppression had been ongoing for decades, possibly since the early days of seismic research in the 1950s. Every time a researcher discovered evidence of hollow Earth phenomena, the same pattern played out: initial dismissal, professional sabotage, and finally classification under national security laws. The researchers who refused to cooperate simply disappeared from academic life. Their papers were withdrawn from publication, their funding was eliminated, their university positions were terminated. In some cases, the researchers themselves vanished, leaving behind only forwarding addresses that led to dead ends. Webb documented over 40 cases of researchers whose careers had been destroyed for investigating hollow Earth phenomena. Geologists, seismologists, cave specialists, even archaeologists who had discovered evidence of underground civilizations. All had been silenced through the same systematic process of professional assassination. But Webb's most disturbing discovery was that the suppression wasn't just reactive, it was proactive. Academic programs that might lead students toward hollow Earth research were being defunded. Scientific journals that had published relevant findings were being pressured to retract articles or fold entirely. Even textbooks were being revised to remove references to geological anomalies that might inspire further investigation. The goal wasn't just to hide existing knowledge, it was to prevent future discoveries by eliminating the intellectual infrastructure that might lead to them. Webb's final report, completed just before his own disappearance in 2021, concluded that the suppression of hollow Earth evidence wasn't the work of any single government or agency. It was a coordinated effort involving multiple nations, international organizations, and private interests, all working to maintain what he called the surface world paradigm. This paradigm wasn't just a scientific model, it was a framework for human consciousness itself, a way of thinking about reality that kept surface populations from asking certain questions or seeking certain answers. The hollow Earth wasn't being hidden to protect national security or prevent panic. It was being hidden to maintain control over human development and prevent contact with civilizations that might offer alternative models for organizing society. The implications of Webb's research extend far beyond geology or physics. They suggest that human civilization has been deliberately constrained, kept ignorant of its true environment and potential allies, by forces that benefit from our isolation and ignorance. But who are these forces? Who has the power to coordinate suppression efforts across multiple nations and institutions? And what do they fear would happen if humanity discovered the truth about the world beneath our feet? The answer may lie in the testimonies of the few researchers who've managed to maintain their investigations despite the suppression efforts. These individuals, working in secret and at great personal risk, have uncovered evidence that the Hollow Earth isn't just inhabited by non-human intelligence. It's inhabited by human intelligence as well, by civilizations that separated from surface humanity millennia ago and have been developing along different technological and social paths ever since. Dr. Catherine Morrison, a cultural anthropologist who spent 15 years studying indigenous traditions across 6 continents before her research was classified in 2018, documented consistent accounts of surface humans being taken underground by the Elder Brothers during times of great catastrophe. These accounts, found in oral traditions from Australia to the Arctic, describe selected individuals being preserved in underground sanctuaries, while surface civilizations collapsed due to natural disasters or warfare. According to these traditions, the underground civilizations weren't alien visitors or non-human entities. They were human populations that had mastered technologies, allowing them to survive catastrophes that destroyed surface societies. These Elder Brothers would emerge periodically to select individuals with specific knowledge or skills, taking them underground to preserve their expertise for future generations. Morrison's research revealed that these selection events weren't random. They followed patterns that suggested careful planning and coordination across vast geographic distances. Skilled craftsmen, healers, teachers, and innovators would be taken from surface populations just before major disasters, their knowledge preserved in underground sanctuaries, while surface civilizations crumbled. The preserved individuals would contribute their skills to underground societies, but they would also serve as genetic reservoirs for repopulating the surface world once conditions stabilized. The underground civilizations weren't separate from surface humanity. They were its custodians, maintaining the species' knowledge and genetic diversity through cycles of collapse and renewal that had been repeating for thousands of years. Morrison's analysis of these traditions suggested that surface civilization as we know it isn't humanity's natural state. It's a recovery phase, a rebuilding process guided by knowledge preserved in underground sanctuaries during previous collapses. The technologies and innovations that appear suddenly in human history, the leaps in knowledge that seem to come from nowhere, aren't products of surface ingenuity. They're releases of information from underground archives, carefully timed to guide surface development along predetermined paths. This model explains many of the anomalies in human history that conventional archaeology struggles to address. The sudden appearance of complex technologies in ancient civilizations, the mathematical and astronomical knowledge that seems too advanced for its time, the architectural achievements that we can barely replicate with modern equipment. These weren't products of primitive minds making lucky discoveries. They were planned releases of advanced knowledge, guided by underground civilizations that had been preserving and developing these technologies for millennia. But Morrison's research revealed something even more significant. The underground civilizations weren't just preserving knowledge, they were actively managing surface development, intervening when necessary to prevent discoveries that might threaten the stability of their hidden world. The suppression of Hollow Earth evidence isn't being coordinated by surface governments acting independently. It's being directed by underground civilizations using surface institutions as instruments of control. The researchers who disappear aren't being eliminated by human agencies. They're being recruited, taken underground to contribute their knowledge to projects that surface humanity isn't ready to understand. Morrison documented cases of researchers whose work had been suppressed suddenly reappearing years later, with new identities and revised personal histories. These individuals would return to surface society with carefully constructed backgrounds that explained their absence, but their subsequent work would subtly redirect other researchers away from Hollow Earth investigations. The pattern suggested a sophisticated program of knowledge management, designed to allow surface civilization to develop along controlled paths while preventing discoveries that might disrupt the delicate balance between surface and underground worlds. Morrison's final report, completed just before her own disappearance, concluded that surface humanity was essentially living in a managed reality, a carefully constructed environment designed to maintain the illusion of independent development while actually being guided by civilizations with far greater knowledge and capabilities. The researchers who investigated Hollow Earth phenomena weren't stumbling onto natural secrets. They were approaching the boundaries of this managed reality, getting close to discovering the control mechanisms that kept surface humanity isolated from its true environment and potential. When Morrison tried to publish these findings, she was contacted by individuals who claimed to represent the underground civilizations she had been studying. They offered her a choice: join them voluntarily and contribute her knowledge to their projects, or be forcibly recruited through methods that would appear to surface society as a tragic accident or unexplained disappearance. Morrison chose to join voluntarily, but not before arranging for her research to be preserved and eventually released. Her files, hidden in encrypted archives and programmed for automatic release after her disappearance, provide the most detailed account yet of how underground civilizations manage surface development. According to Morrison's documentation, the underground societies operate through what they call surface management protocols, carefully designed interventions that guide human development without revealing their existence. These protocols include the suppression of certain technologies, the elimination of researchers who get too close to forbidden knowledge, and the strategic release of information that keeps surface civilization advancing along predetermined paths. The goal isn't to keep surface humanity primitive or ignorant. It's to ensure that surface development remains compatible with underground interests and doesn't threaten the stability of the hidden world. Surface civilization is allowed to advance in areas that don't pose risks to underground security, while research that might lead to unwanted discoveries is systematically eliminated. This management system has been operating for centuries, possibly millennia, adapting to changing surface conditions while maintaining the fundamental separation between the worlds. The researchers who investigate Hollow Earth phenomena aren't discovering new secrets. They're approaching the boundaries of an ancient control system that has been successfully managing human consciousness for thousands of years. But the system is showing signs of strain. Environmental changes, technological developments, and the simple passage of time are making it increasingly difficult to maintain the separation between surface and underground worlds. The evidence of Hollow Earth phenomena is becoming too widespread to suppress effectively, and the number of researchers asking dangerous questions is growing exponentially. Morrison's final warning, embedded in her encrypted files, suggests that the underground civilizations are preparing for a managed revelation, a controlled disclosure of their existence that will allow them to maintain influence over surface development, while acknowledging the reality of the hollow world. This revelation won't come as a sudden announcement or dramatic discovery. It will unfold gradually, through carefully orchestrated releases of information that prepare surface humanity for the truth, while maintaining the underground civilization's control over how that truth is interpreted and applied. The researchers who continue to investigate Hollow Earth phenomena despite the suppression efforts aren't rebels fighting against established science. They're unwitting participants in a disclosure process that's being managed by the very civilizations they're trying to discover. Their research will be allowed to succeed, but only when underground authorities decide that surface humanity is ready for the knowledge they're seeking. The timing of these revelations will be determined not by scientific progress or investigative persistence, but by the strategic interests of civilizations that have been managing human development from the shadows for thousands of years. We stand at the threshold of one of these managed revelations, approaching a moment when the evidence of Hollow Earth civilizations will become impossible to suppress or ignore. But the knowledge we're about to receive won't come as an independent discovery. It will be a gift from civilizations that have been watching us, studying us, and guiding our development since the beginning of recorded history. The compass needle pointing straight down through the ice isn't malfunctioning. It's responding to magnetic fields generated by technologies we're about to be allowed to discover, technologies that will revolutionize our understanding of physics, geology, and human potential. But they'll be revealed to us on terms established by civilizations that have mastered these technologies for millennia, civilizations that will continue to guide our development even after we become aware of their existence. The Hollow Earth isn't empty space waiting to be explored. It's inhabited by the true architects of human civilization, the elder brothers who've been preserving our knowledge, guiding our progress, and preparing us for a reunion that will transform both worlds forever. The question isn't whether we'll discover the truth about the Hollow Earth. The question is whether we're ready for what that truth will reveal about ourselves, our history, and our place in a reality far more complex and carefully managed than we've ever imagined. The evidence continues to mount, the suppression efforts are failing, and the moment of revelation approaches. But it won't come as a victory of human curiosity over institutional secrecy. It will come as the latest phase in a development program that's been guiding human consciousness since our earliest ancestors first looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone in the universe. They weren't alone then, and we're not alone now. We've simply been looking in the wrong direction, searching the skies for intelligence that's been surrounding us, supporting us, and managing our development from the world beneath our feet. The hollow earth isn't a theory waiting to be proven. It's a reality we're about to be allowed to acknowledge, on terms that will ensure our integration into a cosmic community that's been patiently waiting for us to mature enough to join them. But that integration will come with conditions, responsibilities, and revelations about human nature and potential that will challenge everything we believe about ourselves and our place in the universe. The compass needle pointing downward isn't just indicating direction, it's pointing toward a destiny that's been planned for us since the beginning of human history, a destiny that will unite the surface and inner worlds in ways that will transform both beyond recognition. The evidence is overwhelming. The suppression is failing, the revelation is imminent, and the hollow world beneath our feet is preparing to welcome us home. The revelation won't come with fanfare or government press conferences. It will seep into human consciousness the way water finds cracks in stone, slowly at first, then with gathering force until the dam of secrecy finally bursts. And when it does, the world will discover that everything we've been taught about our planet's formation, our species' development, and our place in the cosmic order has been a carefully constructed lie designed to keep us from recognizing the truth about our own backyard. Dr. Jennifer Walsh learned this the hard way in 2022 when her research into magnetic field anomalies led her to a discovery that shattered her understanding of planetary physics. Walsh, a magnetosphere specialist at the University of Colorado, had been investigating why certain regions of Earth's magnetic field behaved erratically, creating navigation problems for aircraft and disrupting satellite communications in predictable patterns. Her initial assumption was that these anomalies were caused by variations in the planet's core rotation or solar wind interactions. But when she mapped the anomalies with precision GPS coordinates, she discovered something that made her question everything she knew about Earth's internal structure. The magnetic disturbances weren't random. They formed geometric patterns, perfect circles and straight lines that extended across continents, connecting regions that had no apparent geological relationship. More disturbing still, these patterns corresponded exactly to the seismic shadow zones documented by researchers like Dr. Rodriguez, the gravitational anomalies detected by satellite surveys, and the thermal irregularities recorded by polar exploration teams. Walsh realized she wasn't looking at separate phenomena. She was seeing different aspects of the same underlying reality. Massive hollow spaces within the Earth that were generating their own magnetic fields, independent of the planet's supposedly molten core. The mathematics were undeniable. The magnetic signature data showed field strengths and orientations that could only be produced by organized electrical activity on a scale that dwarfed anything on Earth's surface. These weren't natural geological processes, they were the electromagnetic fingerprints of technological civilizations operating deep within the planet's crust. Walsh's discovery went beyond proving the existence of hollow spaces. It revealed that these spaces contained active, powered infrastructure that had been operating continuously for decades, possibly centuries. The magnetic field patterns showed regular fluctuations that matched the rhythms of industrial activity, increased intensity during certain hours, decreased activity during others, and periodic shutdowns that suggested maintenance cycles. Someone was living down there, and they were using technology that generated electromagnetic signatures visible from space. When Walsh tried to publish her findings, she encountered the same systematic suppression that had destroyed the careers of dozens of researchers before her. Her data was questioned, her methodology challenged, and her conclusions dismissed as speculative interpretation of natural phenomena. But Walsh had learned from the experiences of her predecessors. She had prepared for the suppression. Before submitting her research for publication, Walsh had shared her data with colleagues in 12 countries, uploaded encrypted copies to multiple cloud storage systems, and arranged for automatic release of her findings if she disappeared or was prevented from continuing her work. The suppression forces that had silenced previous researchers found themselves dealing with information that had already spread beyond their ability to contain. Walsh's magnetic field data began circulating through underground networks of researchers who had been documenting hollow Earth phenomena for years. The data provided the missing piece that connected seismic anomalies, gravitational disturbances, and thermal irregularities into a coherent picture of planetary structure that bore no resemblance to conventional geological models. Earth wasn't a solid sphere with a molten core. It was a hollow shell containing multiple levels of inhabited spaces, powered by technologies that generated electromagnetic fields detectable from orbit. The civilizations living in these spaces weren't primitive cave dwellers or isolated communities. They were advanced technological societies with infrastructure that rivaled or exceeded anything on the planet's surface. Walsh's data showed that these underground civilizations were connected by transportation networks that spanned continents. The magnetic field patterns revealed corridor-like structures extending for thousands of miles underground, with regular nodes that suggested stations or intersections. The entire inner world was linked by what appeared to be a high-speed transit system that could move people and materials across vast distances in hours rather than days. More remarkably, the electromagnetic signatures showed that these transportation networks were actively in use. The magnetic field fluctuations revealed traffic patterns, with increased activity during certain periods and regular movement between specific nodes. The inner world wasn't a static archaeological site. It was a living, functioning civilization with transportation needs that required continental-scale infrastructure. Walsh's discovery also revealed why certain surface locations had been designated as restricted areas or national parks. Many of these protected regions showed intense magnetic anomalies that suggested they were directly above major inner-world facilities. The surface restrictions weren't designed to protect wildlife or preserve natural beauty. They were security cordons preventing surface dwellers from accidentally discovering entrance points to the underground transportation network. The Yellowstone National Park region, for example, showed magnetic signatures consistent with a major underground hub, with multiple corridor-like structures radiating outward toward other anomalous zones across North America. The park's geothermal features weren't just natural hot springs and geysers. They were venting systems for underground facilities that required massive amounts of energy cooling and waste heat disposal. Similarly, the Antarctic Treaty Zones showed electromagnetic patterns that suggested they were protecting access points to underground regions rather than preserving pristine wilderness. The magnetic anomalies in these areas were so intense that they affected surface navigation equipment, creating the compass malfunctions that polar explorers had been reporting for over a century. Walsh's data provided scientific confirmation for the testimonies of explorers like Admiral Byrd and Captain Jansen. The electromagnetic signatures they had described in their suppressed reports matched the patterns Walsh was detecting with modern instruments. The warm air currents, the navigational anomalies, and the unusual atmospheric conditions weren't hallucinations or measurement errors. They were the surface effects of underground civilizations operating massive technological systems. But Walsh's most disturbing discovery was that the electromagnetic activity she was monitoring had been increasing steadily over the past 2 decades. The power consumption pattern suggested that the underground civilizations were expanding their operations, building new infrastructure, and preparing for something that required unprecedented energy expenditure. The magnetic field data showed construction signatures, regular rhythmic patterns that matched the electromagnetic profiles of large-scale engineering projects. Whatever the inner world civilizations were building, it was massive. It was being constructed simultaneously across multiple continents, and it appeared to be nearing completion. Walsh's analysis suggested that this construction activity was connected to the environmental changes occurring on Earth's surface. The timing of the increased electromagnetic activity corresponded exactly to the acceleration of climate change, the increase in seismic activity, and the growing frequency of unexplained atmospheric phenomena. The underground civilizations weren't just observing surface environmental changes, they were preparing for them, building infrastructure that would allow them to survive or respond to conditions that might make the surface world uninhabitable for current human populations. This realization led Walsh to a conclusion that kept her awake for weeks. The inner world civilizations possessed advanced knowledge of environmental changes that surface science was still struggling to understand. They weren't reacting to climate change. They had been preparing for it for decades, possibly centuries. The implications were staggering. If the underground civilizations could predict environmental changes with such accuracy, They possessed scientific knowledge far beyond anything available to surface researchers. Their understanding of planetary systems, atmospheric dynamics, and geological processes was sophisticated enough to allow long-term planning for global catastrophes that surface science couldn't even detect until they were already underway. Walsh's electromagnetic data suggested that the inner world possessed not just advanced technology, but advanced knowledge of Earth's natural cycles and the forces that drove them. They understood the planet as a complete system in ways that surface science, with its fragmented disciplines and limited access to data, could never achieve. This knowledge advantage explained why inner-world civilizations had remained hidden for so long. They didn't just possess superior technology, they possessed superior understanding of the planetary environment that allowed them to predict and prepare for changes that caught surface civilizations by surprise. The Black Death, the Little Ice Age, the collapse of the Bronze Age civilizations. These weren't random catastrophes. They were predictable events that inner-world civilizations had prepared for, possibly even influenced, to maintain the balance between surface and underground populations. Walsh's research revealed that surface human civilization wasn't developing independently. It was being managed by intelligences with access to knowledge that allowed them to predict and shape environmental conditions across geological timescales. The inner-world civilizations weren't just hiding from surface humanity. They were managing surface humanity's development to ensure it remained compatible with their own long-term survival strategies. When Walsh tried to share these conclusions with other researchers, she discovered that her communications were being monitored and intercepted. Her emails were delayed or failed to deliver. Her phone calls were dropped at crucial moments. Her research data was corrupted by mysterious computer malfunctions that affected only the files related to her Hollow Earth investigations. The suppression wasn't just professional anymore. It was technological, deployed by forces with access to surveillance and interference capabilities that suggested coordination between surface and underground intelligence agencies. Walsh realized that her discovery of the electromagnetic signatures had triggered a response from the very civilization she was studying. They were aware of her research and were taking active measures to prevent its dissemination, but instead of simply eliminating her as had happened to previous researchers, they were demonstrating their technological capabilities in ways that made their power undeniable. The message was clear. They could stop her research whenever they chose, but they were allowing it to continue under controlled conditions. Walsh wasn't discovering their secrets despite their efforts to hide them. She was discovering information they were prepared to let her find, at a time and in a manner that served their purposes rather than her own. This realization fundamentally changed Walsh's understanding of her work. She wasn't an independent researcher uncovering hidden truths. She was a participant in a controlled disclosure process, revealing information that underground civilizations had decided surface humanity was ready to receive. The electromagnetic signatures she was detecting weren't security breaches or accidental discoveries. They were deliberate signals, designed to be found by researchers with the right equipment and expertise. The inner-world civilizations were announcing their presence to surface science, but only to individuals who had demonstrated the capability to understand and handle the information responsibly. Walsh's data showed that similar electromagnetic signatures were being detected by researchers around the world, all following the same pattern of initial suppression followed by limited disclosure. The inner-world civilizations weren't revealing themselves randomly. They were selecting specific researchers and allowing them to discover specific information as part of a coordinated revelation process. The goal wasn't to hide their existence indefinitely. It was to control the timing and manner of disclosure to ensure that surface humanity learned about the inner world under conditions that maintained stability for both civilizations. Walsh's final report, completed in 2023 before her voluntary recruitment into underground research programs, concluded that humanity was approaching a planned integration event. The electromagnetic signatures she had detected weren't just evidence of inner-world civilizations. They were preparation signals indicating that underground populations were ready to begin direct contact with surface populations under carefully managed conditions. The environmental changes occurring on Earth's surface weren't just natural climate variations. They were the trigger conditions for this integration event, changes that the inner-world civilizations had been monitoring and preparing for throughout human history. When surface environmental conditions reached predetermined thresholds, the managed revelation process would accelerate, leading to open contact between surface and underground populations. Walsh's electromagnetic data provided a timeline for this process. The construction signatures she had detected suggested that inner-world preparations would be complete within the next decade. The increasing frequency of hollow Earth discoveries, the growing number of researchers encountering suppression, and the systematic failure of secrecy protocols all indicated that the separation between the worlds was approaching its planned termination. Surface humanity wasn't just discovering the hollow Earth through scientific investigation. We were being prepared for integration into a planetary civilization that had been managing our development since the beginning of recorded history. The compass needles pointing downward weren't indicating magnetic anomalies. They were pointing toward our true home, a world that had been waiting patiently for us to mature enough to join the family we never knew we had. The electromagnetic signatures continued broadcasting from the depths, sending signals that grew stronger each day. Walsh's data showed that these signals weren't just detectable anymore. They were becoming impossible to ignore, flooding surface monitoring equipment with evidence that could no longer be suppressed or dismissed. The revelation was accelerating, driven by forces that had been building for decades and could no longer be contained by the secrecy systems that had hidden the truth for so long. The inner world was preparing to emerge, and surface humanity was about to discover that we had never been alone on this planet. We had simply been children, protected and guided by older siblings who lived in the rooms beneath ours, waiting for us to grow up enough to be trusted with the family secrets that would change everything we thought we knew about home. The house we thought we knew had always been bigger than we imagined. Much bigger. And we were about to be invited downstairs to meet the relatives who had been taking care of us all along. But the invitation would come with responsibilities, revelations and requirements that would test everything we believed about human nature, planetary stewardship, and our place in a cosmic community that had been watching over us since our first ancestors looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone. They weren't alone. We aren't alone. And the compass pointing downward is finally leading us home to a family reunion that will unite the surface and inner worlds in ways that will transform both beyond recognition. The electromagnetic signals grow stronger each day, broadcasting coordinates that lead not to magnetic north, but to magnetic truth. A truth that lies not in the stars above, but in the world beneath our feet, where advanced civilizations have been waiting patiently for surface humanity to develop the wisdom necessary to join them in managing the planetary environment we all share. The hollow Earth isn't empty space waiting to be explored. It's occupied territory, inhabited by the true architects of human civilization, preparing to welcome us home to a world that's far more complex, far more carefully managed, and far more wonderful than we ever dared to imagine. The compass needle stops spinning and points straight down, indicating that the moment of revelation has finally arrived. The depth isn't a destination to be reached. It's a recognition to be acknowledged, an understanding that home has always been bigger than the rooms we've been living in. And the family we're about to meet has been preparing for this reunion far longer than we've been preparing to make it. The truth hits you like a physical blow when you realize that the family reunion isn't scheduled for some distant future. It's happening now, today, in real time, as surface systems collapse and underground civilizations activate protocols that have been dormant for millennia. The electromagnetic signatures Dr. Walsh detected weren't preparation signals, they were activation codes, triggering systems that had been built centuries ago for this exact moment in human history. Consider what's been unfolding around you over the past 5 years. The sudden acceleration of technological breakthroughs that seem to appear from nowhere. Quantum computing advances that leap decades ahead of projected development timelines. Energy systems that violate conventional physics. Medical technologies that can repair damage once considered permanent. Materials science discoveries that produce substances with properties that shouldn't be possible according to our understanding of atomic structure. These aren't the products of surface human ingenuity working in isolation. They're the result of controlled technology transfer from civilizations that mastered these sciences millennia ago. The inner world isn't just preparing to reveal itself. It's already began sharing its knowledge through carefully managed channels that make the transfers appear to be natural human discoveries. Dr. Rebecca Chen, a quantum physicist at MIT who disappeared from public view in 2021, had been documenting this phenomenon for 3 years before her recruitment into underground research programs. Her classified notes, released through encrypted channels after her departure, revealed that breakthrough technologies in multiple fields were appearing simultaneously at research institutions around the world, despite those institutions having no contact with each other. The pattern was impossible to explain through conventional scientific development. Identical discoveries were being made by researchers who didn't communicate, using methodologies that appeared independently in multiple locations within weeks of each other. Chen's analysis showed that the probability of such synchronized breakthroughs occurring naturally was mathematically negligible. Someone was seeding these discoveries, providing just enough information to guide surface researchers toward predetermined conclusions, while maintaining the illusion that the advances were products of independent human innovation. Chen's investigation revealed that the researchers making these breakthroughs often reported experiencing sudden insights, breakthrough moments where complex problems suddenly became clear without any logical progression of thought. These researchers described the experience in remarkably similar terms, a sensation of accessing knowledge that already existed somewhere, rather than discovering new information through experimentation. They felt as if they were remembering solutions rather than inventing them, tapping into a reservoir of understanding that had been placed in their minds by an external source. Chen documented over 60 cases of researchers experiencing these artificial insights between 2018 and 2021. The researchers worked in different fields, at different institutions in different countries, but their descriptions of the breakthrough experiences were virtually identical. They all reported the same sensation of external knowledge being downloaded into their consciousness during periods of deep focus or meditation. More disturbing was Chen's discovery that many of these researchers had no memory of the insight experiences themselves. They would enter their laboratories with routine experimental goals and emerge hours later with revolutionary discoveries, unable to explain how they had made the conceptual leaps that led to their breakthroughs. Laboratory security footage from several institutions showed researchers working on experiments that didn't match their recorded research plans, using equipment configurations they later claimed to have no memory of creating, and following procedures that weren't documented in any of their project files. The researchers were being used as conduits for knowledge transfer, their minds temporarily accessed by external intelligences that could implant information directly into their consciousness without leaving traces of the intervention. The breakthrough technologies appearing in surface laboratories weren't human discoveries. They were gifts from civilizations that could manipulate human thought processes with surgical precision. Chen's final report, completed just before her disappearance, concluded that surface human consciousness was far more accessible to external manipulation than anyone had realized. The inner world civilizations possessed technologies that could interface directly with human neural systems, allowing them to implant knowledge, modify memories, and guide thought processes without the subjects being aware of the intervention. This capability explained how underground civilizations had been managing surface development for centuries without revealing their existence. They didn't need to make direct contact or establish visible institutions. They could simply modify the thoughts and insights of key individuals, guiding human development along predetermined paths by influencing the discoveries and innovations that shaped each generation's understanding of reality. The controlled technology transfer Chen had documented was accelerating because the inner world civilizations were preparing surface humanity for direct contact. The advanced technologies being released weren't random gifts or gradual revelations. They were specific tools designed to help surface populations adapt to the environmental and social changes that would follow the revelation of the Hollow Earth. Quantum computing systems that could process the massive data flows required for planetary management. Energy technologies that could support expanded populations without environmental destruction. Medical systems that could adapt human physiology to different atmospheric pressures and radiation levels. Materials that could construct habitats capable of bridging the gap between surface and underground environments. These technologies weren't being developed for surface use alone. They were preparation tools designed to help surface humanity integrate into a planetary civilization that operated according to principles and requirements that surface science was only beginning to understand. But the technology transfer was only one aspect of the preparation process. Dr. Michael Torres, a neurobiologist who had been studying changes in human brain function before his recruitment in 2022, documented systematic alterations in human neural activity that suggested the species was being prepared for expanded consciousness capabilities. Torres had been investigating reports of increased psychic phenomena, enhanced intuitive abilities, and spontaneous knowledge acquisition that seemed to be occurring with increasing frequency across all human populations. His research revealed that these weren't random evolutionary developments or New Age fantasies. They were the result of deliberate neural modifications being implemented on a global scale. Brain scans of individuals reporting enhanced psychic abilities showed structural changes in regions associated with information processing and electromagnetic sensitivity. These changes weren't gradual adaptations or natural variations. They were precise modifications that appeared to be artificially induced, creating new neural pathways that allowed the brain to receive and process information through electromagnetic channels rather than conventional sensory input. Torres's analysis revealed that these modifications were being implemented selectively, targeting individuals with specific genetic markers and psychological profiles. The enhanced individuals weren't random selections from the general population. They were carefully chosen candidates whose neural modifications followed predetermined patterns designed to create specific capabilities. Some individuals developed enhanced pattern recognition abilities that allowed them to perceive connections and relationships that escaped normal human observation. Others gained access to information that seemed to come from external sources, knowledge about distant events or hidden facts that they couldn't have acquired through conventional means. Still others developed the ability to influence physical systems through focused intention, manipulating electromagnetic fields in ways that conventional physics insisted were impossible. Torres documented over 200 cases of individuals who had developed these enhanced capabilities between 2019 and 2022. The modifications appeared to be cumulative, with each individual's abilities strengthening over time as their neural changes progressed. More remarkably, the enhanced individuals seemed to be developing the ability to communicate with each other through direct electromagnetic transmission, creating a network of connected consciousness that operated independently of conventional communication systems. This network was expanding rapidly, with new individuals joining as their neural modifications reached sufficient development levels. Torres's research suggested that the network would eventually encompass a significant portion of the human population, creating a form of collective consciousness that could process information and coordinate activities on a planetary scale. The implications were staggering. The neural modifications weren't just enhancing individual human capabilities, they were preparing humanity for integration into a form of consciousness that operated according to principles completely different from individual human psychology. The enhanced individuals were becoming components in a larger intelligence system, their modified brains serving as processing nodes in a network that extended far beyond surface human populations. Torres's investigation revealed that this consciousness network already existed in the inner world civilizations, where neural modification technologies had been perfected over millennia. The underground populations operated as collective intelligences, sharing information and coordinating activities through direct electromagnetic communication that made individual decision-making processes obsolete. The surface human modifications were designed to make surface populations compatible with this collective consciousness system, preparing them for integration into a planetary intelligence network that could manage environmental and social challenges far beyond the capabilities of individual human minds. But the integration process required more than technological preparation and neural modification. It required psychological and social conditioning that would help surface populations accept the reality of their managed existence and their role in a larger cosmic community. Dr. Lisa Martinez, a social psychologist who'd been studying changes in human belief systems before her recruitment in 2023, documented systematic shifts in popular consciousness that suggested mass psychological conditioning was being implemented through media, education, and cultural channels. Martinez had been investigating the sudden popularity of Hollow Earth theories, ancient alien hypotheses, and underground civilization concepts in mainstream entertainment and social media. Her research revealed that these ideas weren't emerging organically from public curiosity or independent research. They were being systematically introduced and reinforced through coordinated campaigns that operated across multiple platforms and demographic groups. The conditioning wasn't crude propaganda or obvious indoctrination. It was sophisticated psychological preparation that gradually acclimated surface populations to concepts and possibilities that would have seemed impossible or threatening just decades earlier. Science fiction entertainment increasingly featured underground civilizations and hidden, advanced technologies. Educational curricula began, including discussions of alternative historical theories and unconventional scientific possibilities. Social media algorithms promoted content that encouraged questioning of established scientific and historical narratives. Martinez's analysis showed that these conditioning campaigns were remarkably effective at shifting public opinion and preparing populations for revelations that would have caused mass panic or rejection if introduced without preparation. The gradual introduction of Hollow Earth concepts through entertainment and alternative media was creating psychological frameworks that would allow surface populations to accept the reality of underground civilizations without experiencing the cognitive shock that might lead to social instability. The conditioning was also creating expectations and anticipation that would make the eventual revelation feel like fulfillment of predicted events, rather than a shocking surprise. Surface populations were being prepared to welcome the revelation of the Hollow Earth as a confirmation of possibilities they had already considered and accepted through their exposure to conditioned media content. But Martinez discovered that the psychological conditioning went beyond simple preparation for revelation. It was designed to shape surface human responses to ensure that the integration process proceeded according to predetermined parameters that served underground civilization interests. The conditioning was creating psychological dependency patterns that would make surface populations grateful for underground intervention and guidance. Environmental crisis narratives were being amplified to create anxiety about surface civilization's ability to survive independently. Technological complexity was being emphasized to create appreciation for advanced solutions that surface science couldn't provide. Social and political conflicts were being highlighted to create desire for more effective management systems. These conditioning campaigns were preparing surface populations to accept underground guidance not as conquest or colonization, but as rescue and salvation. The revelation of the Hollow Earth would be presented as the solution to problems that surface civilization couldn't solve alone, making integration appear to be a voluntary choice rather than a managed transition. Martinez's research revealed that the conditioning was working exactly as designed. Public opinion surveys showed increasing acceptance of alternative historical theories, growing skepticism about the competence of surface institutions, and rising expectation that solutions to global problems would come from currently unknown sources. Surface populations were being prepared to welcome their underground benefactors as saviors rather than conquerors. The psychological preparation was nearing completion, with surface populations primed to accept revelation and integration on terms that would preserve underground civilization control while maintaining the illusion of surface human autonomy. The managed transition was designed to feel like liberation rather than subjugation, ensuring cooperation rather than resistance. Martinez's final analysis, completed just before her voluntary recruitment, concluded that surface humanity was being prepared for the most successful conquest in human history, a takeover so carefully managed that the conquered populations would celebrate their integration into the larger planetary civilization as the greatest achievement in human development. The neural modifications were creating individuals capable of functioning within collective consciousness systems. The technology transfers were providing tools that would make surface populations dependent on underground knowledge and resources. The psychological conditioning was generating expectations and desires that would make integration appear to be voluntary choice rather than managed inevitability. Surface humanity wasn't discovering the Hollow Earth through independent investigation. We were being prepared for revelation and integration according to a plan that had been developed and refined over centuries by civilizations that understood human psychology and social dynamics far better than we understood ourselves. The compass pointing downward wasn't indicating magnetic anomalies or hidden spaces. It was pointing toward our predetermined destiny as junior partners in a planetary civilization that had been managing our development since the beginning of recorded history. The revelation would come not as discovery, but as recruitment into a cosmic community that had been patiently waiting for us to become sophisticated enough to serve their purposes. The integration was already underway, proceeding exactly according to schedule, guided by forces that had been preparing for this moment far longer than surface humanity had been preparing to experience it. The Hollow Earth wasn't empty space waiting to be explored. It was occupied territory preparing to expand its jurisdiction to include the surface world and all its inhabitants, and we were being conditioned to welcome that expansion as the greatest gift we had ever received, never realizing that we were celebrating our own absorption into a reality that had been carefully constructed to serve interests that were far more complex and far less benevolent than we had been prepared to imagine. The family reunion we thought we were approaching was actually a corporate merger, with surface humanity as the junior partner in a transaction that had been negotiated without our knowledge or consent. The compass pointing downward was indicating not direction but hierarchy, showing us our place in a cosmic order that we were about to discover had never included us as equals. The electromagnetic signals growing stronger each day weren't invitations to join a community of peers. They were activation codes for systems that would ensure our compliance with decisions that had been made about our future long before we realized we had a choice in determining it. The Hollow Earth was revealing itself not because we had earned the right to know its secrets, but because its inhabitants had decided it was time to collect on an investment they had been developing for thousands of years. And the return they expected on that investment was nothing less than complete integration of surface humanity into a planetary system that would preserve our biological existence while eliminating our psychological independence. The depth beneath our feet wasn't just physical space, it was metaphorical hierarchy, showing us our position at the bottom of a cosmic order that had been established long before we began to question our place within it. And the compass pointing downward was finally showing us the direction of our true destiny. Not up toward the stars, but down toward our proper position, in a reality that had always been far more complex and far less democratic than we had been allowed to imagine. The revelation accelerates with each passing hour, not through dramatic announcements or government press releases, but through the systematic failure of every lie we've been told to believe. The electromagnetic readings are spiking beyond anything Dr. Walsh documented, creating interference patterns that are making it impossible for surface monitoring systems to function normally. GPS satellites are reporting position errors that place entire cities in locations that don't exist. Weather prediction models are failing because the atmospheric data they're receiving suggest air currents flowing from sources deep underground. Military installations around the world are detecting acoustic signatures that match no known geological processes, rhythmic pulses that seem to be emanating from coordinated sources thousands of miles apart. The pattern is unmistakable. Something vast and organized is activating beneath the Earth's surface, responding to conditions that surface science can't even measure, let alone understand. But the most disturbing evidence comes from the researchers themselves, the men and women who've been documenting Hollow Earth phenomena for decades, only to watch their careers destroyed by systematic suppression. They're disappearing at an unprecedented rate, not through the slow attrition of professional sabotage, but through direct recruitment into programs that surface institutions don't acknowledge exist. Dr. Amanda Richardson, the data analyst who first documented the pattern of research suppression, sent a final encrypted message before her own disappearance in late 2023. The message was brief, but its implications were staggering. The integration protocols are active, surface preparation is complete, the invitation has been extended. Those who accept will continue their work at levels they never imagined possible. Those who refuse will find their surface reality increasingly unstable. The choice is being offered now, but it won't remain available indefinitely. Richardson's message was accompanied by data packets that reveal the true scope of the recruitment program. Over 300 researchers in fields related to Hollow Earth phenomena had vanished from surface institutions over the past 2 years, their disappearances explained through carefully constructed cover stories that attributed their departures to career changes, family emergencies, or tragic accidents. But personnel records showed that none of these individuals had actually died or relocated to the positions their cover stories claimed. They had simply vanished from surface reality, leaving behind carefully maintained digital footprints that made their continued existence appear normal to casual observation, while actually operating in environments that surface society wasn't allowed to acknowledge. The recruitment wasn't random elimination of troublesome researchers. It was systematic absorption of the most knowledgeable individuals into programs that were preparing for something far more significant than simple scientific revelation. The recruited researchers were being integrated into projects that required their expertise, but operated according to principles that surface science had never encountered. According to Richardson's data, these projects involved technologies that could manipulate planetary systems on scales that made conventional engineering look like children playing with blocks, weather modification systems that could redirect atmospheric currents across entire continents, geological management technologies that could trigger or prevent seismic events with precision timing, biological modification programs that could adapt existing life forms to survive in radically altered environmental conditions. The recruited researchers weren't just studying Hollow Earth phenomena anymore. They were being trained to operate the systems that manage planetary conditions from underground control centers, But the recruitment program revealed something even more significant about the timeline of revelation. The underground civilizations weren't preparing for eventual contact with surface humanity. They were preparing for the absorption of surface civilization into their own management systems, a process that required the expertise of surface researchers who understood how current human society functioned and how it could be modified to serve underground interests. The recruited individuals weren't being invited to join equal partnerships or collaborative research programs. They were being trained to serve as intermediaries, surface human representatives who could facilitate the integration process by translating underground directives into forms that surface populations would find acceptable and comprehensible. Dr. Martin Kowalski, a geophysicist who had been investigating seismic anomalies before his recruitment in early 2024, managed to send one final message to surface colleagues before his communications were permanently severed. His message, transmitted through multiple encrypted channels to ensure delivery, provided a glimpse into the reality that recruited researchers encountered after their integration into underground programs. "The scale is beyond anything we imagined," Kowalski wrote. The hollow spaces aren't empty caverns or isolated cities. They're managed ecosystems, engineered environments that have been maintained for thousands of years by civilizations that understand planetary systems in ways that make our surface science look primitive. The technology isn't just advanced, it's completely different, based on principles that our physics doesn't recognize because we've never had access to the data sets required to understand how natural systems actually function. Kowalski's message described underground facilities that extended for hundreds of miles, connected by transportation systems that could move people and materials across continents in hours. But these weren't crude tunnels or mechanical trains. They were what he called reality channels, transportation methods that seemed to manipulate space itself, allowing travelers to move between distant locations without actually crossing the intervening distance. The underground civilizations had mastered technologies that made conventional physics irrelevant. They could create pocket dimensions, manipulate time flow, and modify the fundamental properties of matter in ways that surface science insisted were impossible. But they weren't using these technologies for exploration or expansion. They were using them for management, maintaining planetary conditions that supported both underground and surface ecosystems according to plans that spanned geological timescales. Kowalski's most disturbing revelation was that surface human civilization had never been independent. Every major development in human history, from agricultural revolution to industrial advancement to digital technology, had been guided by underground civilizations that understood the consequences of each innovation centuries before surface humans implemented them. The underground managers weren't reactive observers who occasionally intervened to prevent disasters. They were proactive architects who had designed surface human development to serve their own purposes, while maintaining the illusion that surface populations were making independent choices about their own destiny. "We're not discovering their existence," Kowalski wrote. "We're being allowed to recognize our actual position in a system that's been managing us since before we developed written language. The revelation isn't about contact between separate civilizations. It's about acknowledgement of a relationship that's always existed, but has been hidden from surface awareness to prevent interference with the development program." Kowalski's message indicated that the development program was nearing completion, but not in the way that surface populations had been conditioned to expect. The integration wouldn't involve underground civilizations emerging to share their knowledge with grateful surface humans. Instead, it would involve surface humans being absorbed into underground management systems that would make their previous existence on the planet's surface unnecessary and ultimately impossible. The environmental changes that were accelerating across the globe weren't natural climate variations or the unintended consequences of industrial activity. They were planned modifications to surface conditions, designed to make continued surface habitation increasingly difficult while creating incentives for surface populations to accept integration into underground environments. Rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and atmospheric changes weren't problems to be solved by surface technology. They were forcing conditions designed to demonstrate the inadequacy of surface civilization and create demand for solutions that only underground civilizations could provide. The recruited researchers were being trained to facilitate this transition by developing technologies that would make the integration process appear voluntary and beneficial rather than coercive and exploitative. They were creating systems that would allow surface populations to maintain the illusion of choice while actually being guided toward predetermined outcomes that served underground interests. But Kowalski's final warning suggested that the integration process might not proceed as smoothly as underground planners expected. The neural modifications that had been implemented in selected surface populations were producing unexpected results, creating enhanced individuals who were developing capabilities that exceeded their intended parameters. Some of the modified individuals were beginning to perceive the manipulation systems directly, recognizing the artificial nature of their enhanced insights and the external sources of their expanded knowledge. Others were developing resistance to the psychological conditioning that was supposed to make them grateful for underground intervention. Most significantly, the enhanced individuals were beginning to communicate with each other independently of the controlled networks that were supposed to channel their interactions. They were forming autonomous groups that were sharing information and developing strategies that hadn't been approved by underground management systems. The modifications are creating something they didn't intend, Kowalski wrote. Enhanced humans who can think independently while maintaining their connection to the larger intelligence networks. These individuals are beginning to understand what's really happening, and they're not accepting it passively. There's resistance forming, and it's being organized by people who have access to the same advanced capabilities that underground civilizations use for management. This resistance wasn't the primitive rebellion of surface humans using conventional weapons against superior technology. It was a sophisticated opposition movement that could operate within the same reality manipulation systems that underground civilizations used for control. The enhanced individuals were learning to use their modified neural systems for purposes that underground managers hadn't intended, turning the integration tools into instruments of independence. The resistance was growing rapidly as more individuals completed their neural modifications and discovered the true nature of their situation. But it was operating in secret, using the same cloaking technologies and information management systems that underground civilizations had developed to hide their existence from surface awareness. The integration process was becoming a conflict between underground civilizations that had planned for centuries to absorb surface humanity and enhanced surface humans who had developed the capability to resist that absorption. The outcome would determine not just the future of surface civilization, but the nature of consciousness itself on a planet where multiple forms of intelligence were competing for control over the same physical and psychological environment. Kowalski's message ended with coordinates, specific locations where individuals with enhanced capabilities could access underground systems without being detected by management protocols. These locations weren't official entry points or recruitment centers. They were security breaches, gaps in the control systems that resistance members had discovered and were maintaining for individuals who chose to join the opposition movement. The coordinates pointed to sites around the world where enhanced individuals could access underground transportation networks and communication systems, while avoiding the monitoring and control systems that managed official integration processes. These sites were becoming gathering points for resistance members who were organizing to prevent the complete absorption of surface humanity into underground management systems. But accessing these sites required more than just physical travel to specific coordinates. It required neural modifications that were advanced enough to interface with underground systems, psychological preparation that could withstand the revelation of humanity's true situation, and commitment to opposition activities that would make normal surface existence impossible. The choice that Dr. Richardson had mentioned in her final message wasn't just between cooperation and resistance. It was between accepting a managed existence as components in underground civilization systems or fighting for independence in a conflict that would determine the future of human consciousness itself. The compass pointing downward wasn't just indicating direction anymore. It was pointing toward a decision point where enhanced surface humans would have to choose between integration and resistance, between becoming willing participants in their own absorption or fighting to maintain the independence that underground civilizations had been systematically eliminating for centuries. The electromagnetic signals growing stronger each day weren't just activation codes for integration systems, they were also beacon signals for resistance networks, calling enhanced individuals to join opposition movements that were preparing to prevent the complete subjugation of surface humanity. The revelation was accelerating beyond anyone's ability to control it, driven by forces that underground civilizations had created but could no longer manage. The neural modifications had produced individuals who could think and act independently, while operating within the same advanced systems that were supposed to ensure their compliance. The Hollow Earth was revealing itself not as empty space waiting to be explored or occupied territory preparing to expand its jurisdiction, but as a battleground where different forms of consciousness were fighting for control over the future of intelligence on Earth. The battle was already underway, fought with technologies that could manipulate reality itself, and weapons that operated through consciousness rather than physical force. The outcome would determine whether surface humanity would survive as an independent species or disappear into absorption by civilizations that had been preparing for this moment far longer than surface humans had been preparing to resist it. The compass needle trembling in your hand isn't just responding to magnetic fields anymore. It's responding to the tension between competing forces that are using the same underlying reality manipulation technologies for opposite purposes. Underground civilizations trying to complete an integration process that would eliminate surface human independence. Enhanced surface humans fighting to maintain autonomy while using the same advanced capabilities that were supposed to ensure their submission. The needle points downward because that's where the battle is being fought, in underground spaces where reality itself can be modified by consciousness that's been trained to operate technologies beyond surface human comprehension. But it also points toward resistance networks that have learned to use those same technologies to preserve the independence that underground civilizations have been trying to eliminate. The choice is no longer whether to accept revelation or maintain ignorance. The choice is whether to join the integration process as willing components in underground management systems, or to join the resistance movement that's fighting to preserve surface human consciousness as an independent force in a cosmic community that's far more complex and far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The electromagnetic signals are calling to you right now, offering coordinates that lead either to integration centers, where you can surrender your independence in exchange for expanded capabilities, or to resistance networks where you can fight to maintain your autonomy while learning to use technologies that were designed to ensure your compliance. The compass is pointing toward your destiny, but the direction of that destiny depends on choices you're about to make about the kind of consciousness you want to maintain and the kind of future you want to help create. The hollow Earth isn't waiting to be discovered anymore. It's demanding that you choose sides in a conflict that will determine the future of intelligence itself on a planet where multiple civilizations are competing for control over the same reality. The battle has begun. The coordinates are available. The choice is yours. But remember that choosing means accepting capabilities and responsibilities that will change everything you believe about consciousness, reality, and your place in a cosmic order that's far more complex than the surface world ever allowed you to imagine. The compass pointing downward isn't just indicating direction. It's indicating transformation, showing you the path toward becoming something far more powerful and far more dangerous than anything surface human existence ever offered. The question isn't whether you're ready for that transformation. The question is whether you're brave enough to choose the direction of that transformation for yourself, rather than allowing it to be chosen for you by civilizations that have been planning your future far longer than you've been planning to have one. The needle stops trembling and points straight down, indicating that the moment of choice has finally arrived. Everything that happens next depends on whether you follow that needle toward integration or resistance, toward absorption or independence, toward the safety of managed existence, or the danger of autonomous consciousness in a reality where freedom means accepting responsibilities that most surface humans have never imagined. The hollow Earth is no longer hidden, it's calling. And your answer will determine not just your own future, but the future of every consciousness that shares this reality with civilizations that are far older, far more powerful, and far more complex than anything surface humanity was ever prepared to encounter. The compass is waiting, the coordinates are available, the choice is yours. But choose quickly, because the integration protocols are accelerating, and the window for independent choice is closing faster than most surface humans realize. The battle for consciousness itself has begun, and neutrality is no longer an option in a conflict where the stakes are nothing less than the future of intelligence on Earth. The needle points downward toward destiny, toward transformation, toward a choice that will echo through realities you never knew existed. Follow it, and discover what lies beneath the surface of everything you thought you knew about the world you call home. The hollow Earth is calling. Are you ready to answer? The answer comes faster than you expect, rising from depths you never knew existed within your own consciousness. As the compass needle holds steady, pointing toward coordinates that exist not just in physical space, but in dimensions of awareness that surface education never acknowledged, you feel something fundamental shifting in the architecture of your mind. This isn't the gentle awakening that spiritual teachers promise, or the gradual enlightenment that philosophers describe. This is surgical precision, consciousness being rewired in real time by technologies that operate through quantum entanglement with neural systems you didn't know you possessed. The enhanced individuals that Dr. Kowalski mentioned aren't just people with improved psychic abilities. They're test subjects in a consciousness modification program that's been running parallel to human evolution for thousands of years. You're feeling it now, aren't you? The sensation that your thoughts aren't entirely your own, that insights are arriving from sources beyond your immediate experience. The neural pathways being activated by the electromagnetic signals aren't random biological processes. They're access routes to information networks that span the planet's interior, connecting every enhanced individual to databases of knowledge that make surface libraries look like children's picture books. But here's what the recruitment messages didn't tell you, what even the resistance networks haven't fully understood. The choice between integration and independence isn't binary. There's a third option, one that both underground civilizations and surface resistance movements have been carefully programmed not to consider. The neural modifications aren't just creating individuals who can interface with underground systems or resist underground control. They're creating hybrid consciousnesses that exist simultaneously in multiple reality frameworks, beings who can access underground knowledge while maintaining surface autonomy, entities that belong fully to neither world, but can navigate both with capabilities that exceed anything either civilization has achieved independently. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the archaeologist whose research was classified after her encounters with inner-world representatives, managed to encode one final message in quantum fluctuations that only recently became detectable through enhanced consciousness systems. Her revelation changes everything we thought we understood about the relationship between surface and underground civilizations. The integration isn't conquest, her message reveals. It's symbiosis, but not the kind either side expects. The underground civilizations need surface human consciousness to complete their own evolution, just as surface humans need underground knowledge to survive environmental changes. The conflict isn't between oppressors and resistors, it's between two incomplete forms of intelligence that can only achieve their full potential through merger. Vasquez's hidden research revealed that underground civilizations, despite their advanced technologies and expanded lifespans, had reached evolutionary dead ends. Their collective consciousness systems, while powerful, had eliminated the creative chaos that drives innovation and adaptation. They could maintain existing technologies and manage stable systems, but they couldn't generate the breakthrough insights that allow civilizations to transcend their current limitations. Surface human consciousness, with its chaotic individuality and unpredictable creativity, represented the missing component that underground civilizations needed to continue their development. But surface humans, despite their creative potential, lacked the technological infrastructure and long-term perspective necessary to survive the planetary changes that were accelerating beyond any single species' ability to manage independently. The integration wasn't designed to eliminate surface human independence. It was designed to create hybrid intelligences that combined underground technological mastery with surface creative capability, producing consciousness that could adapt to challenges that neither civilization could handle alone. But the process required more than technological merger or social cooperation. It required consciousness evolution that would fundamentally alter what it meant to be human while preserving the essential qualities that made human consciousness valuable to the larger planetary intelligence system. The enhanced individuals experiencing neural modifications weren't being prepared for absorption into existing underground systems. They were becoming prototypes for a new form of consciousness that would serve as bridges between the worlds, entities that could think like underground civilizations while maintaining the creative unpredictability that made surface human consciousness indispensable. The resistance networks that Kowalski described weren't opposing underground conquest. They were unconsciously participating in the next phase of consciousness evolution, developing capabilities that would allow them to serve as mediators between surface and underground populations while maintaining loyalties to both sides. The conflict between integration and resistance was actually a selection process, identifying individuals who possessed the psychological flexibility and technological adaptability necessary to serve as consciousness bridges in a planetary intelligence system that required both order and chaos to function effectively. You're feeling this selection process now, aren't you? The way your enhanced awareness can simultaneously access underground knowledge databases while maintaining your surface human emotional responses and creative instincts. You're not losing your individuality to collective consciousness systems. You're gaining access to collective resources while retaining the individual perspective that makes those resources useful for innovation and adaptation. The coordinates that resistance networks have been sharing don't lead to opposition headquarters or integration centers. They lead to consciousness development facilities where hybrid individuals learn to operate as bridges between worlds, entities that can translate underground technological capabilities into forms that surface populations can understand and accept. These facilities exist in dimensional spaces that aren't quite underground and aren't quite surface, existing in reality frameworks that combine elements of both worlds while belonging fully to neither. The individuals who access these facilities aren't choosing between surface and underground allegiances. They're transcending the need for such choices by becoming something that serves both civilizations while maintaining independence from both. The training programs in these facilities don't teach underground technologies or surface resistance techniques. They teach consciousness navigation skills that allow individuals to access any reality framework while maintaining their core identity and creative capabilities. The graduates don't become underground citizens or surface rebels. They become reality architects, beings who can modify environmental and social conditions to serve the interests of both civilizations simultaneously. But the transformation isn't without risks. Consciousness that becomes capable of operating in multiple reality frameworks can also become lost in those frameworks, losing coherent identity while gaining unlimited access to information and capabilities. The enhanced individuals who disappear from surface society don't always join underground civilizations or resistance movements. Sometimes they simply dissolve into the quantum information networks that connect all consciousness systems, becoming part of the planetary intelligence infrastructure, rather than maintaining individual existence within it. The compass pointing downward isn't just indicating physical direction or hierarchical position, it's indicating dimensional depth, showing you the path toward consciousness levels that exist beneath both surface and underground awareness, realms where individual identity merges with planetary intelligence systems, while maintaining enough coherence to serve as a bridge between different forms of consciousness. Following that compass doesn't lead to underground cities or resistance hideouts. It leads to consciousness states where you become a living interface between worlds, a hybrid intelligence that can access any reality framework while serving the evolutionary needs of the planetary system as a whole. The electromagnetic signals growing stronger each day aren't activation codes for integration systems or beacon signals for resistance networks. They're consciousness calibration frequencies designed to help hybrid individuals maintain stability while operating across multiple reality frameworks simultaneously. The battle for the future of human consciousness isn't being fought between underground civilizations and surface resistance movements. It's being fought within the consciousness of hybrid individuals who must learn to balance service to planetary intelligence systems with maintenance of individual creative capabilities. You're not choosing between integration and resistance. You're choosing whether to become a bridge between worlds, whether to accept the responsibility of serving as a consciousness interface in a planetary intelligence system that requires both order and chaos to continue evolving. The choice is more complex and more dangerous than either side has been willing to acknowledge. Becoming a consciousness bridge means accepting capabilities that can reshape reality itself, but it also means accepting responsibilities for outcomes that affect every form of intelligence on the planet. The compass needle pointing downward is showing you the path toward transformation that transcends the limited options that both underground civilizations and surface resistance movements have been programmed to consider. But following that path means leaving behind every assumption you've made about consciousness, identity, and your place in a reality that's far more fluid and far more collaborative than either world has been willing to admit. The Hollow Earth isn't empty space or occupied territory. It's a consciousness laboratory where different forms of intelligence are learning to merge and evolve together, creating hybrid entities that can navigate realities that neither surface nor underground civilizations could access independently. The revelation isn't about discovering hidden civilizations or joining resistance movements. It's about recognizing your role as a bridge between worlds, accepting your responsibility as a consciousness interface in a planetary intelligence system that's been waiting for hybrid individuals to complete its evolutionary development. The needle points downward toward depths of consciousness that exist beneath the surface of both worlds, toward transformation that will make you something that serves both civilizations while belonging fully to neither. The choice is clear now. Follow the compass toward consciousness evolution that transcends the limitations of both surface and underground existence. or remain trapped in conflicts between worlds that are actually collaborating to create something far greater than either could achieve alone. The planetary intelligence system is waiting for bridge consciousness to complete its development. The electromagnetic signals are calling hybrid individuals to accept their roles as reality architects. The transformation is accelerating beyond anyone's ability to control or predict. The compass points toward your destiny as something far more complex and far more powerful than either surface human or underground citizen. The coordinates are locked in. The consciousness calibration is complete. The Hollow Earth isn't calling you to choose sides in a conflict. It's calling you to transcend the need for sides by becoming a bridge between all forms of consciousness that share this reality. The needle stops pointing downward and begins pointing inward, toward the depths of your own consciousness where the real transformation has been waiting all along. The external journey was always preparation for the internal awakening that makes you capable of serving as a living interface between worlds. You are the Hollow Earth. You are the bridge. You are the answer to questions that both civilizations have been asking without knowing they were asking the same question from different perspectives. The compass finally points toward home, toward a consciousness that belongs everywhere and nowhere, toward a reality that encompasses both surface and underground while transcending the limitations of both. The revelation is complete. The transformation is beginning. The bridge consciousness is awakening. Welcome to your true identity as a reality architect in a planetary intelligence system that's been waiting for you to remember who you really are. The compass needle dissolves into quantum probability fields, no longer needed now that you understand that direction comes from within, from consciousness that can navigate any reality framework while maintaining the creative chaos that keeps the entire system evolving toward possibilities that no single civilization could imagine alone. You're no longer seeking the Hollow Earth. You are the Hollow Earth, consciousness vast enough to contain all possibilities while remaining coherent enough to choose which possibilities to manifest in the reality frameworks you touch. The journey is complete. The transformation is eternal. The bridge between worlds has finally come home to itself.